Hello everybody, welcome back for another video. Hope you're all doing well and that you're all having an absolutely incredible day. And without any further ado, let's jump right into it. We're on a roll. We're on a roll here as far as when it comes to optimistic news about the cryptocurrency markets. Regardless of where prices might be on some days, a lot of the, like I've said before in other videos, a lot of the larger analysts, the more popular people are all, I don't think bullish is even the word anymore as far as everything that's been taking place. So for like a light bit of context, one of the main things that I go over and discuss, and this is just not even happenstance, it's just more of a this is what the news actually ends up being, revolves around accumulation, usage, and entrance into the Bitcoin market. It's always very big news. We've had things before about how many wallet addresses there are, how many new people on the network, the amount of usage, the amount of money flowing through the network. And a large portion of speculation over the course of the last 8-9 years shifted from no one's going to use it, or maybe it'll take a while, to we see that some people are using it. We still have a long way to go. Governments are now looking at Bitcoin. We're not quite there yet. Some governments are using Bitcoin. Let's see where this ends up going. Maybe institutions will get into the market. Institutions are in the market. Institutions are buying crypto. We have no idea how much they're buying. MicroStrategy tells us how much Bitcoin they have, and now we've revolved all the way to the other side of the spectrum as far as basically everyone is kind of in the market at this point, whether directly or indirectly. We know that there are also a number of countries, for those of you who missed it, their sovereign funds, like the government fund, is actually also sometimes either directly invested in Bitcoin, or they have indirect exposure through MicroStrategy, or could have been through Grayscale, what have you. These funds are worth hundreds of billions. They kind of buy fragments of everything. So we also know that that's part of the case as well. A lot of what I like to go over, this is personally myself. I told you all before years ago, just so you were all well aware, this was not going to be a hype channel. The point of this channel was more to constantly be informative, therefore the daily news videos, to let you understand what's actually happening. It's cool if some days we have news that prices are doing this, or prices might go to there, or hey, Bitcoin just hit this brand new all-time high. But it's also to make you really understand why we hit that all-time high, or why prices are moving in a certain way, or why a lot of times in the comment section, or even more so years ago, people will say, well, you're not talking about this coin, or you're not talking about that coin. And I have to tell you, well, they're not in the news. That coin's not producing. They're not really doing anything. No one's building on top of it. But that's also an entirely different conversation that we're not going to go over right now. The amount of accumulation of not only crypto, but honing in directly on Bitcoin is quite staggering. I've never myself been able to figure out why a lot of people in crypto, and I'll say in this tense, never tried to believe in Bitcoin, or never really understood the amount of energy flowing around it. I don't mean like literally like plugging it into a wall, that kind of energy. But when you follow this channel or any other reputable channel, I don't follow any other channel, so whatever other channel you might be following, and you hear the actual news of what's going on, pushing away the garbage and the noise of this coin is amazing, it's going to do a 9,000x, which I will warn you about very early. Right now, you're going to be seeing a lot more of that. I'm already seeing a lot of news articles on websites that I've been using for years, and it's just the cyclical hype bull cycle that we find ourselves in, where they're now creating articles like, you missed out on XRP, you missed out on Cardano, we'll buy this new crappy coin. It's going to 200x. And I don't understand how they're even able to create things like that, where they're basically telling people to jump into a brand new coin that's probably going to be a security and isn't trusted, tried, and true. But that's also, once again, another discussion. We know for a fact, just based off of the code, that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. I shouldn't have to reiterate that, but for the purpose of the argument, this is where we currently are. We know that, I believe at the time of me making this video, I believe more than 90% of all Bitcoin that will ever be has already been mined. We've gone over that before as well. The level of accumulation is quite intense and has been for a while. And I think the reason why I bring you, or try to bring you, these videos that are more level-headed than other channels, because believe me, I've seen people before, this was years ago, people were asking me, I won't name names, people were asking me why my channel isn't like this person, why my channel isn't more like that person, why am I not recording this way, why am I not doing this? And it comes down to like views as well. I can see that these other channels get a lot more views because they have literal bells and whistles behind them. They have all these lights, they have all these colors, but the information that they provide is usually nonsense. The things that they say, even a lot of other crypto channels that were really big that kind of obliterated into nothing. They never talked about the actual things that really mattered. A lot of them, even in some cases, became more political, which I was like, can we just focus on the actual money-making scheme of this as opposed to anything else that might be at the bottom and or any other area? When you talk about the actual, like the literal amount of Bitcoin that there is for normal people, we've gotten tons of different numbers, and I've tried speculating on them. I've told you some of them in videos as well. It's not a lot. I'll lightly, briefly go over it once again. 21 million Bitcoin. It is believed that 4 to 6 million Bitcoin are lost and gone forever. Old wallets, people lost their passwords and stuff. I've met tons of people who've lost their passwords to their original old wallets from 2011, 2012. They tend to not want to talk about them because, you know, who would want to when you lost that much Bitcoin? And then you get down to the numbers of how much is already accumulated. We've had news over the course of 2023, maybe not. No, I was going to say late 2022, but it's just been 2023 of like inactive coins, or coins that have been deemed to be now long-term holders. That is to say, any wallet, I believe, that has held coins for over 180 days, I believe that that's the metric. We've seen a lot of wallet addresses that have been buying up a huge amount of Bitcoin over the course of multiple years, and there's only been coins going in and no coins going out. And if we did see coins going out, it was usually in one large batch that was then moved to a ledger or some other type of a cold storage hardware wallet. We know that the amount of Bitcoin created per day is 900. So a lot of times my frustration myself stems from the fact that, I mean, it's actually multifaceted, if we can be completely honest here. It's from the idea that Bitcoin was created to kind of be this saving grace for the everyday common man, and kind of has transformed into this like money-making machine for the people who are already wealthy. So you've seen me and heard me before. You've heard the tone of my voice in other videos where, for instance, Michael Saylor has admitted or has said that the company owns, I think, 180,000 Bitcoin. And you have to write these down and like conceptualize the actual number, that of all the actual what would be liquid Bitcoin available for the market after the 4 to 6 million Bitcoin have been factored in as lost and gone forever, there are certain companies that are holding 1.5, 2.5% of all the Bitcoin that will ever be. So they go onto the news and they proudly proclaim, you know, how much Bitcoin they have, how much richer they are. Bitcoin's price went up by 16%. Look how much money we have now. And everyone stands there and kind of like claps for them. And I stand there and I go, they're taking all the Bitcoin away. But in a free market, you're not supposed to complain about things like that. or even really draw attention to them, because the rich are rich because of favor or whatever other things that people tell themselves. The amount of Bitcoin that's left for normal people continues to dwindle. And I've believed for a while that we are going to get to this point in, I want to even say the term society, where it is nearly apparent to me that Bitcoin has been wrangled and gotten control of. Not in a like a very, I don't know, like what the word would be. It's more of the people who know what's up know what's up. There's a reason why BlackRock got into the space. I mentioned that before last year. BlackRock didn't get into Bitcoin because they want to make a safer, more decentralized, better world. They understand that if current trends continue, this coin per coin is going to be over $1 million, and they're trying to find the best way to capitalize, and they basically have. When we hear that these other institutions and these other companies and these other countries are buying, the news is often fragmented. So we will hear that a country holds 800 Bitcoin. This company owns 1,600. That one owns 13,000. And when you hear these numbers all together, people don't usually throw them into a bucket, hit equal on the calculator, and see exactly how much is being accumulated. Even the news that we had before, that just based off of their fund, that Grayscale alone was holding around 600,000 Bitcoin. And the big news was that they were selling. Of course, the selling pressure from Grayscale was lowering the price of Bitcoin. But I was like, no one took into account that this one company was holding 600,000 Bitcoin. The other numbers that we've received before is that of the addresses that are buying Bitcoin and storing it, not selling it, or if they do move it, they move it to another device and it is not being sold on a crypto exchange. The number ranges and has pendulumed anywhere from 1 million to 1.4 million coins that are actually liquid, air quotes, that are like available for people around the world to buy. And that number also isn't concrete, because a lot of people are also using crypto exchanges to store their coins. So it's a general pool of coins that we know the crypto addresses of from these crypto exchanges. And people say, well, this crypto exchange is holding 227,000 Bitcoin. All that Bitcoin must be liquid, as it is, swimming in this pool and anyone has access to it. But we know even then that a large portion of these coins are just not moving. So if someone happens to have an entire Bitcoin, they may have 20% on a ledger, 20% on another ledger, 20% on a computer, and 20%, another 20%, two times on two different cryptocurrency exchanges as like a safeguard, not having all your eggs in one basket. For those of you who aren't doing that, I would implore you to please not have all your money on one exchange or on one device or whatever the case might be. It's not to scare you. It's just more to be realistic. We live in the future. We live in a world where things can go awry at a moment's notice, especially with things online. But it looks like that a lot of those coins aren't actually as liquid as we would assume, as there are a lot of people we've done surveys. I've asked people here before. I've asked you before on Twitter, how many people plan on selling their Bitcoin? And usually the general number is that people plan on selling, getting rid of a small amount of their Bitcoin, or maybe even an entire one, what have you, by the time the price is between $500,000 to $1 million. And I would assume that the general idea is, if I can sell a portion of it and buy a home or put a huge down payment on a home or be able to retire, cool. We're nowhere near those numbers, and therefore we can only assume that amount of Bitcoin will continue to remain illiquid. Even when we get to 1 million, people aren't selling off the entirety of their Bitcoin. The idea of a $1 million Bitcoin means that we have entered hyper-Bitcoinization. Bitcoin is it. We see prices in euros, yens, and dollars, but also right beneath it, it's also the store is taking Satoshis. When you get to the actual nitty-gritty of how much Bitcoin is created per day. We went over that already. It's 900 per day. And this is the like combined effort of tens of hundreds of thousands of machines around the world. Think of, if you can, a warehouse. Imagine, full of tens of thousands of machines. Now multiply that by around 300. If you can like graph it out in your mind, so you can see 300 more of these gigantic factories. Now spread them all around the world. Those 300 factories plus, I'm doing 300 as a generalized round number. 300 factories, all with tens of thousands of machines in them, running 24 hours a day. They collectively only create 900 Bitcoin per day. That is to say, when we have the actual halving, that number will decrease to 450. And what we've seen before is that if the demand remains the same, Bitcoin's price will mathematically have to double because the demand is the same, but the amount of Bitcoin being created has been cut in half. However, something even crazier happens, where it becomes more difficult to mine the Bitcoin, and a lot of times we don't always hit those exact figures of creation, or a lot of times it becomes a little bit askewed, but the demand continues to rise. Why does it rise? Because Bitcoin has gotten more expensive. For some reason, we live in a universe where people won't buy if the price is low because it seems to almost have no value to them. However, they will accumulate something if the price goes higher. This happens a lot. For those of you who don't know, on the side, like one of my hobbies is I collect comic books. Not that it's like hyper relevant here, but it's more of a number of years ago, there were a lot of just Spider-Man comics and different language comics and all these other things that I began to see, and I realized that they were hyper undervalued. And I remember telling people, I was like, hey, you can get the first appearance of Miles Morales, like the first print of it, for like $20. And people were like, yeah, but you know, it's only worth $20. Like it's not that. So, you know, whatever. I was like, okay, sure, fine. I bought up a lot of them. For those of you who don't know, I'm an obsessive collector. When I collect anything, I don't just get one. I literally scour the internet to buy as many of these things as possible. Some kind of, I don't know what it is in my brain, but it's, you know, very obsessive in this way. And then years later, some of these, especially the first prints, I think rose to anywhere between $400 to $1,200, depending on the grade of them and if they were in the poly bag and stuff like that. And I saw people then commenting and being like, oh man, you're so lucky to get. And I was like, no, I'm not lucky. Like I just saw that there weren't a lot of them. And I saw them at a very low price, just assuming that even if it had gone to $40, that I was going to profit in this sort of way. And it's only because the comic book became more valuable that it then became something to have. It became like a comic book status symbol, if you will. You own the first appearance of Miles Morales. That's insane. No one can own that. How do you have so many of these things? It's happened before. I've seen a lot of other, they're not documentaries, but like news things where people are talking to comic book collectors. Some of these people in their 50s and 60s, and they own the first appearance of Superman. They the first Captain America, and people are like, wow, that's amazing. And they're like, no, I bought this when it was like maybe $55 in the 70s. Nobody wanted it. Or there was like demand for it, but people were like, $55, it's not, whatever, kind of on the fence. And this is just what happens. What's that other, and I keep forgetting the name of it. That is not an idea so much as it is a reality. We were talking about it maybe a month ago. There's some type of the phrase, someone's going to help me out here. Thank you very much in advance. It's basically when people see something that has, or rather costs a lot of money, they then attribute it to wealth. So it's kind of like if you saw a Maserati that was for sale for $6,700, like a whole lot of them, like a literal lot of hundreds of Maseratis and BMWs and Porsches. And then every other car manufacturer around the world had them for $6,700. You're like, I mean, the color's nice, but the wheels are a bit off. I don't care for the back. The trunk isn't that big. You would find an excuse not to buy it. If the very next day they raised all the prices of these cars to $250,000 to $750,000, people would go bananas. The people who actually bought them as a way to drive back and forth from work, they'd be like, wow, you are so lucky to have owned that, as opposed to being like, no, you could have got the exact same thing when the price was lower. And this is expected, rather, it is happening. It is also expected to accelerate even more for Bitcoin over the course of coming years. If you see that Bitcoin, especially in the beginning of 2020, didn't it drop to around, like, was it 15, 16,000? I don't remember. It was something weird. Very low price. No, I think it was even lower than that. I think it was definitely lower than that. A lot of people weren't buying. People were selling off in a panic. Bitcoin goes up to 50,000. It then becomes this thing where if you manage to buy it when it was at 10K, you're a genius. Bitcoin goes to 70K. Oh my gosh, you made a 7X on your money. I wish I could have bought it. If Bitcoin goes to 100K, it then becomes the equivalent, depending on where you live in the world, it becomes the equivalent to like owning property. You own something that is as expensive as property or as land. If Bitcoin goes to $250,000, that's a nice house in some parts of the world, in some parts of America, depending on where you are. I know property prices are constantly rising higher. Then it becomes this like status symbol. You are the person who chose not to buy a home. Instead, you bought Bitcoin. Look how much money you've made. Bitcoin goes to $1 million. It's this thing that only the wealthy own. And you want to hold on and hoard as much Bitcoin as possible. Bitcoin goes to $10 million. You're the 1% of the 1%. How smart you were for buying early. How could you possibly have an entire Bitcoin? Billions of people on the planet don't also have it. And this is what I think we are currently teetering on. I think we're in a very peculiar position in the market and in the world right now, that prices of Bitcoin continue to fluctuate in very like rapid manners, almost as if this accumulation isn't happening. And we know that it's happening. Like we can actively see, like there's a relative level of transparency in the world as far as how much Bitcoin is being bought and how much is being held, especially by larger companies. This kind of leads us into the topic for today. I know it was a long introduction, but it's more of a, I like to explain these things because I've noticed in my life, I say things to people and they don't get what I'm saying. It's not that I'm like hyper intelligent. I think I have a very weird way of saying things. And sometimes people will look at me and they're like, okay, cool. And then kind of walk away, not really, getting it. So I needed you to have all that background before we really got into it. The amount of optimism is like overflowing at this point. And it's become very difficult for me to not get hyped. That's the only way that I can really put those words together, because I know that the accumulation is there. I know that the buying is there. And I know that the potential for these crazy price rises also is directly next to it. So when we hear these people talking about it, I sit there and I try and remain calm as best I can, what have you. And then I'm like, of course these numbers are possible. Of course we're going to hit these figures. Of course we're going to hit these numbers at some point in the actual future. So, Bitcoin evangelist and investor, his name is Tor Demeester. He hasn't been in the news for a while. Tor used to be in the news maybe once a month. 2019, 2021 is Tuur Demeester, Demeester. Expects the world's flagship cryptocurrency to reach a major milestone in connection with spot Bitcoin ETFs. In 3 months, everyone is still expecting something crazy to happen. And I've kind of gotten to the point where if something crazy doesn't happen, I think I will have lost all hope in like reality, because all the numbers are there, all the signs are there. And I think the majority of the market is kind of just waiting for like a catalyst, like something to spark to really set everything off. But just the news that we know that all these things are already happening and the spark hasn't taken place. And I get it. Don't scream at me, please. I know once again, for the third time, people have been telling me the market's exactly where it's supposed to be. The market, the prices, and I'm like, I get it. But that still doesn't play into the logic of all the stuff that we know is going on. He's expecting something to happen in 3 months, as he commented on a tweet about ETFs posted by Samson Mao, the other guy who's been in the news quite prominently recently, who thinks that he believes that, We are going to be over $100,000 per Bitcoin by the halving. The Bitcoiner issued a comment on the recent daily Bitcoin purchases made by spot Bitcoin ETF issuers, apart from Grayscale, because Grayscale is special. He said the spot Bitcoin ETF issuers are accumulating approximately 9,000 Bitcoin daily. We know that there are only 900 Bitcoin made per day. These few companies are accumulating 10 times more than is actually being created. If you put that on the basis of any other market, we would logically, by all the mathematic accounts, need to 10x in price for the price to make sense. If we were producing 1 bar of gold per day, however, there were 10 bars of gold being purchased by 10 companies a day, that's not including the millions and millions and millions of other people and governments and investors and collectors. A lot of people just like collecting gold and silver per day who are also collecting. If we imagine we only found imagine there's one gold mine and only one gold bar comes out per day. And around the world, 10 times that is being purchased by 10 companies. Just those 10 companies alone are doing a 10x on the amount of Bitcoin that's actually even coming out of the computers. Keeping in mind that the amount of Bitcoin being produced by the people who are mining Bitcoin, they're not selling all of their Bitcoin. They would only have a massive loss if that was the case. You don't put $25 million into a Bitcoin mining jungle warehouse to simply sell off everything. You are then at a gigantic loss, as you also have to pay for electricity. They tend to sell off fragments of Bitcoin that they've made over the course of a month just to pay the bills. All the rest gets pocketed by them. They're accumulating Bitcoin. We can then assume that they're probably only selling off 1/5, 2/5 of the Bitcoin that's actually being created by them to keep the lights on. These companies are buying 10 times as much as is being created. That's before that. These are only the companies that have ETFs in the USA. That's not factoring in. We know that there are multiple spot Bitcoin ETFs in Canada. They're also buying constantly. There are multiple in Europe. There are multiple in Australia and in New Zealand who are also buying. These are specific companies who are accumulating. That does not account for you, your family, your friends, new people who are getting into the market every day. If we have constantly, every day, 10,000 new Bitcoin addresses, do you think these people are just making these addresses and not buying? They're still buying fragments. If you have 1 million Satoshis, 0.01 Bitcoin, if you have 100 people buy that, that is an entire Bitcoin that's also off the market. The level of accumulation is staggering. That's why, not going to argue, the idea that we're supposed to, we're exactly where we should be, to me, in my mind, is nonsense. If it was just these companies, if these companies were the only entities who were buying up Bitcoin, cool. We're exactly where we should be. They're still gobbling up all the Bitcoin. If they're the only ones, no one else. You don't have 100 million people in the Bitcoin market. It's just these companies. Well, it makes a lot of sense. Cool. Then we're exactly where we should be. We should be seeing these really weird price fluctuations up and down as we get news that maybe there's an 11th company who's going to join the fray. 10 times each day is insane. That's where we got that news from before, from Samson Mao, for those of you who missed it, who was like, he's expecting $1 million Bitcoin before people can actually realize what's going on. You can't accumulate all the liquid Bitcoin that's actually out there, like that's available for people to buy, that quickly and that harshly. It's one thing if they were accumulating maybe 400 collectively per day. 450, half of all the Bitcoin created in a day is 450. If these companies were buying half of all the Bitcoin created per day, that's still insane. Imagine one gold bar created per day, and you have two companies who walk up to that gold bar, split it in half, and they go, okay, this is ours. They're the only people who literally have access to that gold. What happens to the price of gold? It skyrockets. What happens if there were only 21 million US dollars and then 6 million for some reason got lost and burned somewhere, and there's a new US dollar created every day and they're bought up by multiple companies? Now, what happens if there's 900 Bitcoin created per day and one company buys the entirety for the world? That 900 Bitcoin could be fractionalized and would equally go to tens of thousands, maybe like 100,000 people, depending on how you're doing the math of the 0.003. 10 times daily is being accumulated just by people who have issued these ETFs. Demister pointed out that this is 10 times more than people who are mining Bitcoin put together produce per day. After the Bitcoin halving event happens in April, he believes spot Bitcoin issuers will accelerate Bitcoin purchases by doing a 20x of what's being created per day. By the time we have the halving, the amount of Bitcoin that is produced is going to fall to 450. If they double it, they'll be able to keep the exact same numbers. If they do a 20x of that 450, they alone, first of all, for those of you who missed it, we know that they now hold over, I think the last number we got was 105,000 Bitcoin. Just those companies in 2 weeks, two and a half, 3 weeks. We should be a lot higher in price. I don't know how everyone isn't getting that. I don't know how you could even say otherwise. I know I've seen the charts. I've seen the relative movements. I've seen the idea of where the price should be or moving the old market. And this is happening like 2017. We didn't have this level of accumulation in 2016, nor 17. Nor 2020, nor 2021. This is like public accumulation on a massive scale. And that's just these companies. The other thing that I don't get is how people aren't like more terrified. If Bitcoin takes off, there won't be any for you. These companies will be holding all of it. And the idea that someone told me before, someone said you act like people can't buy Satoshis. You're not understanding at all the math behind any of this. If right now, and I mean from the standpoint of complete realism, you've seen that thing before. If you haven't, go look it up. Multiple news agencies in the US were asking people, if there was an emergency right now for, a $1,000 emergency, could you cover it? I think it was 60, 70% said no. Like there's no, I don't have $1,000 in the bank to cover that emergency. Imagine doubling that to a $3,000, $4,000 emergency. How many people do you know are going to be like, okay, cool, I got it. And I know someone was like, well, my friends can. Well, that's cool that your friends have money. Now, for the rest of everyone else out there, that's not a reality for people. Now, imagine you have normal life Imagine you have things going on. Now, also realize that there's this thing called Bitcoin. If Bitcoin, I don't know what Bitcoin's price is right now. Let's say Bitcoin's price is 40,000. To get 1 million Satoshis, you would need $400. If these people can't afford that for an emergency, how many people are spending $400 to make sure that they have 1 million Satoshis? Now, let's say Bitcoin's price does a 10x to 400,000, one of the mid-range predictions for Bitcoin's price over the course of 2025. That then leads us to a $4,000 price just for 1 million Satoshis. Just for 1 million, only 1 million Satoshis. When you hear this level of accumulation by these companies, and you maybe even have the same mind frame, I don't know, as me, as far as where this is all going and exactly how high Bitcoin's price is going to be, we are going to live in a world where a lot of people are already struggling. The people in the future who realize that Bitcoin is over $1 million and they could have bought it or fragments of it for next to nothing, I think we're going to see a lot of angry people. A lot of angry people. We still have another 116 years of Bitcoin mining left. It's staggering to me how there isn't more of like an emergency or like an urge by a lot of people to accumulate Bitcoin. I sincerely don't understand it. It's something that actually boggles my mind. Like, I can't conceptualize. Like, no, so I understand, once again, and I said that before in another video. It's a huge difference if you have a bunch of other obligations and stuff going on and family to feed and you have kids and you have this and all this other stuff going on. But this is specifically for the people who have like 3 cars, who have like tons of shoes, who have all this stuff, 5 TVs, all these things in their house that they don't want and need. I told that to I had one friend in particular years ago, one of the very few who listened to me. I told her, I said, listen, you got all this stuff in your house. A lot of it you don't even use. Sell it. Find a way to get rid of some of this stuff, because it was just sitting there. She wasn't using any of it. She sold a whole bunch of it. I was shocked. I was shocked that someone listened to me. She sold a whole bunch of it, and she actually bought Ether. I don't remember how many she bought. It wasn't hundreds, but it was like a good enough amount. This was years and years ago. And then at some point in 2021, she sent me a message, and she said that the money that she got from it, if she sold her Ether, would have been enough to like buy a studio apartment somewhere, like buy a studio apartment that she was thinking of having as like a rental income kind of thing. And I was like, that's crazy that it was just because she sold the stuff that she wasn't using around her house that got her that money to be able to, like, in the future buy property. And when I have a lot of friends, I have a lot of members in my life who just buy like the most nonsensical, ridiculous things, and they try and show off on social media, and they try and show other people how much they have, and they're broke in real life. They don't have jack diddly squat. And I'm like, the contrast of what could be as far as how high Bitcoin could go in the future, where prices might land, how rich the richer might actually get. Like, have you ever thought about what is going to happen to the world if Bitcoin gets to $1.5 million per coin? How rich you would be? How rich these companies are going to be? We're constantly in this world where like AI is taking over everything. Automation is taking over everything. And it's like a lot of people are kind of just, I don't know if it's being desensitized or what, but a lot of people are floating through it as if all this stuff isn't taking place and they don't have to invest and they don't have to think about the future in some sort of way. I find the narrative right now in the world is very, very odd to me. There's like a really weird cloud that's kind of like hanging over so many people's heads, and I don't know how to deal with it. I keep chatting with people. Like I told all of you before, I have friends who are like in their early 40s and stuff like that now. As time has gone on, of course, they've gotten older. And I chat with them, and I'm like, and I try and be nice as well, because you can't be harsh with people. So I'm like, hey, have you what are you doing for retirement? How are you thinking about retirement? And I know a lot of friends who like laugh and they chuckle and they're like, I don't have to think about retirement. Like, they're expecting their pensions to like do something and like go somewhere and like actually help them properly retire. They're not saving anything because they're in essence expecting their hard work over the course of 40 years retiring at 65 or 70 or 72. Like, it's by the time they get old enough to retire, the retirement age is going to be 70 something. They won't have any actual money. You see how high prices are going now. You see how much land is going for. The price of housing is, all these houses are being bought up by these companies. There seems to not be a really strong idea of the future for a lot of people. It's simply now in the present, and I can't conceptualize that or put that together. It's the same exact thing for the cryptocurrency market, for people who are in the crypto market. So many people, this isn't, of course, this isn't financial advice, but the people who don't buy, who don't participate in the market, especially when prices are low, I'm like, you've been in the market for a while. How are you not seeing what's going to happen? We know that Bitcoin's price is going to go back up. Even if you just believe that Bitcoin's price is maybe going to hit the previous all-time high, why didn't you buy at 15? Why didn't you buy at 20,000? 27,000 you also didn't buy? Bitcoin was at 32,000. You didn't get any? 40,000. It's very, very weird. And then to hear these numbers of accumulation and no one bats an eye. No one talks about it. No one talks about the actual numbers of accumulation. These numbers add up very quick. We were talking about that in mid-January when we first got wind of how much Bitcoin these companies were buying every single day, even before we got to the 9,000 per day thing. And it was by the middle of, was it April or something like that? They might have around 400,000 Bitcoin, just these companies alone. That's nearly half or more of all the liquid Bitcoin that's actually out there. Just these companies. So when you talk about a $400,000 to a $600,000 Bitcoin over the course of next year, you're like, you bet your gosh darn rear end it's going to go there. That's absolutely insane to think of. There's so much more. This article actually continues and continues and continues and continues. I'm quite exhausted just mentally even going through all of this stuff, but it's so fascinating to see all of this happening right in front of us. And I know, I get it. I know, I see your comments. I see your stuff on Twitter as well. I know a lot of you are paying attention, but the other people who aren't, how can you get this news and not pay attention? How can you see something when you talk about BlackRock? If BlackRock alone, if BlackRock was the only company who had an ETF and they were only accumulating 450 Bitcoin per day, half the Bitcoin being created daily, they were accumulating, we should be double in price. You talk about these companies are doing a 10x, and we have days like the other day. What was it? Where the Fed left the interest rate unchanged and prices dropped. And I was like, are we all on the same planet? Are we looking at the same news? Who cares about what the interest rates are doing? We know that they're going to lower interest rates at some point this year. They said that they're going to. Because they didn't do it on the first meeting, that dropped prices. All people are doing is selling to BlackRock. You're selling to Fidelity. You're selling to ARK Invest, who are gladly, and we still are going to get news from the other companies who are also accumulating. Also understand that the CEOs of these crypto exchanges, they're also buying. These people know what market they're in. They know who they're talking to. They know the level of accumulation that's happening. We know that Jack Dorsey is not buying, half a Bitcoin per day and being like, okay, I'm good. The accumulation is there right in front of our faces. We are going to, and it's going to be a very weird time in history. We are going to get to the point where some of these companies become hyper billionaires. Some of them might become trillion-dollar companies just based off of how much crypto they have. There are going to be everyday, normal, average people who have more Bitcoin than countries do. Imagine we get to the point where Bitcoin goes over 1 million and other countries basically have to bend the knee. They spend all this time, complaining. And this is why we don't hear much from the US, because they already hold billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. Other countries are going to have to start accumulating as well. We're going to get to a point where I know I can feel it. Like it feels terrible. People are going to be very angry that they don't own any Bitcoin. And a huge portion of it is going to it will come down to indifference. We're 15 years into Bitcoin being a thing. How many friends and family members do you have that you've talked to till you were blue in the face about buying crypto, buying some Bitcoin, buying fragments, and they refuse? Bitcoin drops down in 2020. These people look at you and they go, I told you. I remember he's not my friend anymore. I knew this guy. Every time I saw him, it had something to do with my money, and that was really annoying. He would always ask the question, and it just happened to always be on days where the price was going down, which I found really interesting, that he knew that the price went down. He would always ask me, so how's that Bitcoin thing going? Knowing that the price went down, because he was trying to take a jab. He was trying to push a button to make me feel stupid for being in the market. And I saw him one time, and the prices had just gone up. Maybe this was 2021. I saw him, and he asked me again, so how's Bitcoin going? And I was like, it's great. I was like, a lot of my friends have gotten very, very rich. I made a lot of money, blah, 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 blah. And he shut up. He literally sat there and didn't say a word, because I think it hit him in that moment that he also could have made a lot of money. He also could have got into the market. He also could have bought some altcoins. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to you understand what I'm saying. But we have a very, whatever it's going to be, it's going to enter the history books. But yeah, this article continues for quite a long time. As always, I'll link this in the description below so you can all read it, look at it, click through it, however you want. But yeah, I don't get it. I truly don't get it. We should be a lot higher in price. And I think I need to see us there in price for everything to kind of make sense. Maybe like an ends justifies the means kind of thing. If we don't go over a $300,000 Bitcoin next year, it's rigged, completely. They did an exceptional job of accumulating and keeping the price as low as possible. You can't accumulate this much every single day. 10 times what's being created. That much isn't being sold by the people who are mining it. Very, very interesting times ahead. Yeah, I do sincerely hope that you've all enjoyed this very different video. I do hope that you all are having a great day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever the heck you might be. I do hope it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and or supporting. And I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.